Our second little challenge is to create virtual paper model. The first task is hunt down the reference image. This is where you can set your own difficulty. If you don't have much experience, look for models with mostly right angles and as fewer pieces as possible. And even if you know what you are doing, I would highly advise you against anything with curved surfaces, because of time constraints of this project. I will show you two different models from the easier side. The second part that is mandatory for my student is to actually print it, cut it out and glue it together, so we have reference for the final shape we want to achieve. Before we start modeling anything, we need in most cases to edit the source image, because we want to use it later as a texture. So whatever you have, import it to the bitmap editor. If you are converting it from vector format, set high enough DPI. Start with cropping out anything we don't need and maybe rearranging some parts if you think it's necessary. Then I would suggest to get rid of all necessary colored pixels, so we don't have to be too careful with modeling. Magic wand should do the trick here. Finally, we would like to have square image. Be careful to not change the resolution of the image, but the canvas, so the image won't end up stretched. Just copy the bigger value to the smaller one. Good practice is also to have the resolution be some power of 2. Now don't change the canvas, but the image itself, and pick the closest lower power of 2. Good enough? Don't forget to export it in format that supports alpha channel. With my second image it will be slightly different, because the butterfly is on two separate pages. So first step will be stretch enough the canvas and move both pages to one layer. Then it's exactly the same as the previous one. Move the pieces, crop the unnecessary, square the canvas and finally resize the image. Now I can jump right in the Blender and just drag and drop the images to the 3D view. It will face us and that's not what we want, so find the object properties and reset all the transforms. Before I start, I will also turn off the selection on the image, because I don't want to accidentally interact with it. Let's start with the tower. Super simple shape with square footprint. I will add a simple plane, move it to the bottom of the tower, scale it down and rotate 90 degrees around X axis. Quick tip, if you want to be more precise with the transforms, hold down Shift. Now for the first time we will actually change the geometry of the object. With the plane selected, switch to the edit mode. In the edit mode we can select different parts of the object, individual vertices, edges or faces. We have just one face, so select it and fire up the extrusion tool. After the first extrusion, you can adjust it with the arrow, but be careful, if you hit the plus, it will extrude the selection again and create more geometry, which is exactly what we want if we are happy with the first one. The rest of the tower is just combination of extrusions and transforms. If you want to tweak the geometry afterwards, you always have to select it first, and keep in mind that generally you can select only elements that you can see. If you want to select something behind the faces, you need to first activate the X-ray mode for the viewport. On the top of the tower, I need to scale down some polygons all the way to 0. That means some vertices will lay on top of each other in the same place. We definitely don't want that in our models. So after the shape is finished, I will select everything in vertex selection mode, right click and choose remove double vertices. I can go back to the object mode and fix the rotation so the tower isn't lying on its side. Let's make the building number 2. Simple plane will be a good base for this one as well. This time I will try to create the side profile first, so when the plane is in its place, switch to the edit mode and move the vertices where they should be. To create the roof shape, I need to cut the plane in half. The simplest way is probably using the loop cut tool. Now I have the necessary points to work with. Before I will make the rest of the building, I will go back to the object mode and position the side to its almost final place. Now I know how far I have to extrude it. Edit mode, extrusion, object mode, and I'm done. When you are extruding, sometimes might happen that the polygons are facing the wrong way. It's another pretty common mistake. With simple solution, select all and find recalculate normals in the mesh menu. The third and final building looks kind of more complicated, so I will approach it with slightly different method. Same beginning, create plane, place and scale it properly and switch to edit mode. This time I will create two sides of the building at the same time, still with extrusions, transform and loop cuts. But now with the help of beveling. I will get rid of this edge, go back to the object mode and rotate the object similarly as the second building. Edit mode again and I will try to fold the side of the building as I would physically do with the paper. Select the side and with the shift click on vertex that's on the edge until it has different color. That means this vertex is the active one. If we now change the pivot point to the active element, all the transform tools will use it as origin, including the rotation, so just rotate it 90 degrees around the Z-axis. With the side still selected, turn on the snapping and switch it to the vertex. Duplicate the selection and snap it right to the other side. Then do the same thing with the front. We created a lot of doubles, so get rid of them. And also recalculate the normals. It still lacks the roof. Connect the edges with new polygon, cut it in half and move the middle up. Don't forget to turn off the snapping and change the pivot back to median. Before I will move the buildings together, I want to wrap the texture on them. For that I will change the layout to the UV editing tab. If I select everything and choose unwrap from the UV menu, you can see it's just a mess. You can try the Smart UV project and the result will be really nice, but we don't want to create texture, we already have one, so we need to precisely tell Blender how it should be unwrapped. Select edges where you want to cut the mesh. Those should be the same edges that you've glued together when you made the real model. Right click and mark seam. If you select everything and unwrap it now, it should look pretty much same as the reference image. Speaking of which, let's open the image on the left side and use the transform tools to place the UV island properly. Sometimes you will have to even tweak individual points. That's all for this one. Now repeat the same steps for the other two buildings. Just remove the bottom faces before you unwrap. When unwrapping is done, switch to Shading tab and create a new material. For now, we leave everything as it is and just feed our image texture to the base color slot. Add texture, image texture, change it to the Big Ben and connect the color with base color. You should see the result in the viewport. Select the other buildings and pick the same material. We are almost done now. Switch back to the Layout tab, hide the image and change the shading to textured so we see what we are working with. Also, turn off the backface culling so the other side of the polygons is visible. Finally, carefully place the buildings where they belong. Put something resembling a table below it. And we are ready for render. The materials are already good enough, but in order to create a render, we need a camera and lighting setup. I will show the easiest setup I can think of. Just find a nice view of the scene, add a new camera and go to the View menu, where you can find Align Active Camera to View. The camera has probably different focal length than our viewport, so we need to zoom in or out. Make sure the camera is selected and play with its focal length until you are happy with what you see in the frame. The composition and lighting is where you can really distinguish your renders from others, so take your time, not like me. For the lighting, I will use HDR image as environment and call it a day. In the Shading tab, switch the shader type from Object to World, create environment texture and pick one from your computer. If you don't have any, you can download them from HDRihaven.com. The link is in the description. Just connect color to color. Back to the Layout tab so I have a bigger view of the result, and in the inspector I want to see the render settings. For this project, the real-time renderer EEVEE should be more than enough. If you want to see the result directly in the viewport, change the shading option to rendered. Turn on ambient occlusion and screen space reflections. You can also play with bloom and depth of field. Keep in mind to not overdo anything and that depth of field settings are not here but in the camera properties. Final touch before render, set alpha in film to transparent so we don't see the background, and maybe try a little more contrast in the color management. Now you can safely render the image. Don't forget to save both the project and the image. The last step is to place the image to some bitmap editor and put something to the background. Even simple gradient and vignette should do the trick. And if you want to see few different methods, I will continue with the butterfly model. The beginning is same as for previous model. Start with empty scene and drag to it the reference image we've prepared. Get rid of all the transforms of the image and turn off the selection. I would like to create the shape of the wings by extruding one single vertex. So it doesn't really matter what mesh object I will use as a base, for example the plane. Put it right in the middle of the wings. Go to the edit mode, make sure all the vertices are selected, right click and choose merge vertices in the center. This will leave us with one vertex in the middle. I can move it where I want and extrude it straight up. This middle line is the only one I care about being straight. All other points can be created by hitting E for extrusion and freehand positioning on the silhouette. You don't need to be too precise, just try to keep the points outside rather than inside. If you are done, select the first and last point and connect them with F, so you close the loop. Then select all the points and fill them with F again, which will create one huge engon. And if you remember the rules for engons, you should know that this one is planar, that means it's okay, but it's not convex. And even if you are not sure, it's good to let Blender cut it to the convex pieces before further manipulation. The operator is in the mesh menu under cleanup. That's one finished wing. Now the same process for the bottom one. The process will be same even for the body up until the convex splitting. Right before we split the concave faces automatically, we need to define few cuts manually, because we want to bend the parts in some places. Select two vertices that define the cut, right click and choose Connect Vertex Path. Then repeat it for the rest of the parts. Don't forget, we still need to split the concave faces, so select everything and split them. Now we can hide the reference image and prepare the material. If you don't see your models, it probably means they are facing away from you. You can either flip the normals or give it some thickness. In this particular case, I would prefer the thickness. The solidify modifier is probably the fastest solution. Before we set the material, we need the UV map. So straight to the UV editing tab and place the image to the left editor. The UV unwrapping is the same as for the Big Ben. You don't even need to create any seams this time. Only catch can be that the UVs are mirrored, but it has an easy fix. Select the UVs and in the UV menu is a mirror option for you. Quick reminder, if you want precise manipulation, hold down Shift. If we are happy with our UV coordinates, we can switch to the shading tab and create a new material. The base is same as for the Big Ben, just insert the image texture and connect the colors. But because I wasn't really precise with the modeling, there is a lot of excess on the edges. So this time I will combine the principled shader with completely transparent one. Add the transparent shader and make sure the color is pure white. In order to combine two shaders, we need a mix shader. If we connect them together, we can now switch between the shaders with the vector. And we can set the vector to the alpha channel of the texture. That means what is invisible in the image should be also invisible in the material. But we have two problems. First obvious one is that the object isn't transparent but black. That's because of the viewport optimization. We have to tell our material to actually show the transparency. In the material settings, change the blend mode to alpha blend, and if Blender doesn't crash, we should see through the object. Other obvious problem is that the shaders are inverted. What should be color is transparent and vice versa. This also have a simple solution, just switch the shaders in the mix shader node. The result is not nice, but it's usable. Put the material on the rest of the parts so we can finish the modeling. Back to the layout tab with the textured shading. Start with the body, put it in the middle and adjust the rotation. Also, I will put a plane underneath. Select the body and switch to the edit mode. Select just one leg and go to edge selection mode. Now with Shift, click on the edge we want to bend until it's the active edge, similarly as we did with the Big Bang folding. Change the pivot to the active element and also change the coordinates to normal. If we now use the rotation tool, it will be aligned with the edge. Rotate the leg and repeat the process to other legs. When all the limbs are bent, jump back to the object mode and add the mirror modifier to the body. Do the same with the wings, and the rest is exactly the same as we did with the Big Bang.